Welcome to Midnight Stories. Hi, I'm Everett Clean, and this is Midnight Stories, where I share chilling tales that are sure to send shivers down your spine. Before we begin, please hit the like button. It helps support my work and spreads these stories to more people. Thank you and enjoy. The story I'm about to share happened a few years ago, just outside Missoula, Montana, where I've lived most of my life. It's a tale that's haunted me ever since, changing how I see the wilderness I thought I knew so well. I've always been an outdoorsy person. Hunting, fishing, hiking, you name it, I've done it. I even consider myself something of a survivalist. Growing up in Montana, that rugged lifestyle is almost second nature. The landscape demands respect and preparation, but even with all my experience, I wasn't ready for what happened during what should have been a routine camping trip. Let me set the stage. Missoula is surrounded by what locals call big sky country, vast wilderness that's as beautiful as it is unforgiving. Picture dense forests stretching endlessly, mountains towering into the heavens, and hidden valleys that might never have seen a human footprint. It's breathtaking, but it can be brutal. I pride myself on being prepared. My garage is packed with top-of-the-line camping gear, survival equipment, and enough food supplies to last months. My first aid kits could rival those of a paramedic, and I have navigation tools that could guide me out of the Amazon. But sometimes, no amount of preparation can help when nature decides to throw you a curveball. It all began in late August when my old friend Nolan called me. Nolan and I go way back. We met in college, where I was studying environmental science, and he was pursuing a business degree. After graduation, life took us in different directions. I stayed in Missoula, working as a park ranger and wilderness guide, while Nolan moved to Seattle to climb the corporate ladder. Despite the distance, Nolan and I stayed in touch over the years. He would often call, venting about the stress of city life and reminiscing about our college adventures. One evening, during one of these calls, he brought up an idea that caught me off guard. Evie said, his voice faint and distant over the phone. I need to get out of this concrete jungle. Remember that secret fishing spot of yours? Think you could show me? I hesitated. The spot he was talking about wasn't just off the beaten path. It was deep in the backcountry, far from any marked trails. It wasn't the kind of place for someone without serious outdoor experience. But Nolan wouldn't take no for an answer. Come on, man, I need this, he pleaded. I want the full untamed wilderness experience. No tourist trails, no glamping, the real deal. Maybe it was the desperation in his voice, or maybe it was my own nostalgia for the good old days, but I found myself agreeing. All right, I said, but you'd better be ready for some serious hiking. This isn't a walk in the park. We spent the next few weeks planning. I sent Nolan a list of essential gear, made sure he was up to date on his vaccinations, and gave him a crash course in wilderness survival over video calls. To my surprise, he seemed eager and soaked up every bit of advice I threw at him. The day before we set out, I went over my gear one last time. Tent, sleeping bags, water purification systems, first aid kit, emergency beacon, bear spray, everything was there. I also packed my trusty hunting rifle. It wasn't hunting season, but when you're heading into the deep wilderness, it never hurts to have a little extra protection. As I zipped up my backpack, my wife, Laura, walked into the garage. She's always been supportive of my outdoor adventures, but I could see the worry etched on her face. You sure about this, Ev? She asked, leaning against the doorframe. Taking Nolan out there, he's not exactly outdoorsy. I nodded, understanding her concern. I know, but he needs this. And hey, it'll be good for him to get some dirt under his fingernails for once. Laura smiled, but it was a tight smile, more worry than reassurance. JJ, just be careful, okay? That area you're heading to, it's pretty remote. Always am, I said, pulling her into a hug. We'll be back before you know it, with plenty of fish and stories to share. If only I had known then how prophetic her words would be. If only I had realized that the stories we'd return with wouldn't be the kind you'd want to tell around a campfire. I should have listened to that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a perfect Montana summer day. I picked up Nolan from the airport and we headed straight for the trailhead. As we drove, I couldn't help but notice how out of place he looked. His hiking boots were spotless, his backpack still had the price tag dangling from it, and he was wearing a button-up shirt that seemed better suited for a casual Friday at the office than a trek into the wilderness. You sure you're ready for this? I asked as we pulled into the parking lot at the edge of the wilderness area. Nolan grinned, his excitement practically radiating. Born ready, Ev. Let's do this. We shouldered our packs and set off. The first few miles followed a marked trail that wound through towering pines and crossed over bubbling streams. Nolan kept up a steady stream of chatter, pointing out every bird and flower like a kid on a field trip. It was endearing, in a way, seeing the wilderness through fresh eyes. As we hiked, I filled him in on the local flora and fauna, pointing out edible plants and teaching him how to identify animal tracks. He soaked it all in, asking questions and even taking notes on his phone. I had to remind him more than once to watch his step instead of staring at his screen. By midday, we reached the point where the marked trail ended. From here on, we'd be in true backcountry territory. I pulled out my GPS to double-check our coordinates before turning to Nolan. "All right," I said, gesturing toward the dense forest ahead. "From here on out, it's the real deal. Stay close, watch your step, and let me know if you need a break." Nolan nodded, though his earlier enthusiasm had dimmed a little as he took in the sight of the untamed wilderness, a sprawling sea of green broken only by rocky outcrops and fallen trees. As we pushed deeper into the forest, the terrain became more challenging. We climbed over moss-covered logs, skirted around thorny bushes, and navigated steep inclines. Nolan's steady stream of chatter gradually gave way to heavy breathing and the occasional groan of effort. It was clear this wasn't what he'd expected. During one of our brief rest stops, I first noticed a strange odor carried on the breeze. It was faint, barely noticeable at first, but unmistakable. It smelled like wet dog, only stronger, with an underlying hint of decay. I furrowed my brow, scanning the forest around us. Could be a dead animal, I thought, or maybe a bear had passed through recently. "Everything okay?" Nolan asked, noticing my distraction. I forced a smile, not wanting to alarm him. "Yeah, just getting my bearings. Ready to move on?" As we continued, the smell came and went. At times it was so faint I wondered if I was imagining it. Other times it was so strong it made my eyes water, yet, no matter how much I looked, I never saw its source. No carcass, no bear scat, nothing out of the ordinary. The sun was low on the horizon when we finally reached the clearing by the lake. It was a small body of water nestled in a natural bowl formed by the surrounding hills. The surface was as smooth as glass, perfectly reflecting the pink and orange hues of the setting sun. "Wow," Nolan breathed, taking in the view. This is incredible, Ev." I nodded, feeling a swell of pride. This spot had been my secret for years, a hidden gem I'd discovered on a solo trip and kept to myself ever since. Sharing it with Nolan felt right, like passing down a treasured heirloom. We worked quickly to set up camp as the light faded. I showed Nolan how to pitch the tent and gather firewood while I set up our bear bag and prepped the fishing gear for the morning. As night fell, we sat around the campfire roasting hot dogs and swapping stories. The crackling fire, the stillness of the lake, and the canopy of stars above made it feel like we were in a postcard. It was perfect. Almost too perfect. Looking back, I should have known. In the wilderness, moments of serenity are often the calm before the storm. The next morning, we woke with the sun. After a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal and coffee, we grabbed our fishing rods and headed to the lake's edge. The water was calm, promising a good day of fishing. I showed Nolan how to cast his line, laughing as he fumbled his first few tries. He tangled his line on his first few attempts. "Don't worry," I reassured him, chuckling. "It takes practice. You'll get the hang of it." As the morning wore on, we settled into a comfortable rhythm. Cast, wait, reel in, cast, wait, reel in. The repetitive motion was meditative, and I found my mind beginning to wander. That's when I saw it, a flash of movement just beyond the tree line. My hunter's instincts kicked in and my pulse quickened. Whatever it was too big to be a deer and moved too fast to be a bear. It disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me to wonder if I'd imagined it. Nolan, oblivious to my sudden alertness, was busy swatting at mosquitoes and muttering curses under his breath. "How do you stand these bugs?" he grumbled, reaching for the insect repellent for what had to be the 10th time that morning. I was about to respond when I heard it, a loud snap of a branch breaking, clear and sharp, somewhere behind us. The sound echoed across the clearing, unnaturally loud in the sudden stillness. "Ev." Nolan's voice was hesitant, tinged with fear. "What was that?" I stood slowly, my eyes scanning the tree line. The forest seemed to hold its breath, an oppressive silence settling over the clearing. Then I smelled it again, that wet dog odor, stronger than before. This time it was mixed with something metallic and acrid, a stench that turned my stomach. "Nolan," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "listen to me very carefully. We're going to pack up our gear nice and slow, and then we're heading back to camp. Got it?" He nodded, his face pale, and we began to move deliberately, avoiding sudden motions as we gathered our things. My eyes never left the forest, scanning for any sign of movement. We were almost ready to leave when I saw it again. A dark shape, massive and unnervingly fluid, moved between the trees. It was much bigger than a man, and its movements sent a chill down my spine. "Run!" I whispered to Nolan, my voice barely audible. "Oh, run!" We took off, abandoning our fishing gear in our haste. The sound of our pounding footsteps seemed deafening in the quiet forest, but it was quickly drowned out by something else. A deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. As we sprinted, I caught glimpses of our pursuer through the trees. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. Massive and lean, its dark shape weaving effortlessly between the trunks. Its matted fur clung to its muscular frame, slick with something dark. It ran on two legs, its loping gait devouring the ground between us with terrifying speed. And its face. God, its face. A long muzzle bristling with razor-sharp teeth, eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence that didn't belong in any animal. "What the hell is that?" Nolan gasped, his voice high with terror. "I don't know," I panted back. "But keep running! Eat thy roll." We barreled through the underbrush, branches slapping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. Behind us, the creature's ragged, rasping breath echoed through the woods, always close, always relentless. I didn't know how long we ran. Time had lost all meaning in the chaos. But eventually, mercifully, we burst out of the dense forest into a small clearing. A shallow stream cut through the middle, its water glinting in the sunlight like salvation. "The water," I gasped, grabbing Nolan's arm and pulling him toward the stream. "It might mask our scent." We splashed into the icy water, the shock of it barely registering through the adrenaline surging in our veins. The current tugged at our legs as we stumbled upstream, finally collapsing behind a large boulder. Our chests heaved, lungs burning as we struggled to catch our breath. Nolan was sobbing quietly, his tears carving clean tracks through the dirt on his face. A pang of guilt hit me hard. I had brought him out here, promised him an adventure, and instead delivered a waking nightmare. But there was no time for guilt. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of pursuit. For a long, tense moment, the only sounds were the gurgle of the stream and our labored breathing. Then I smelled it again, that wet dog stench, stronger than before, wafting on the breeze. "Come on," I whispered, forcing myself to my feet. "We've got to keep moving. It'll pick up our trail again soon." Nolan looked up at me, his wide eyes brimming with fear. What was that thing, Ev?" "I don't know," I said, shaking my head as I offered him a hand. "But we can figure it out later. Right now, we need to focus on surviving."